We're starting at 6:15, so only 3 minutes late, which is not bad for Filipinos. So, all right, mabuhay, everyone, and welcome. Happy Filipino American History Month. Today we're going to make history because for the very first time, we have Mrs. Loida Lewis, the indomitable Mrs. Loida Lewis, and the unflappable Nicole Ponseca here at Chief. So, really excited to have both of you here. I guess by way of introduction, because I always forget to introduce myself. I'm Ms. Angela Reed. I have been a Chief member since 2019. I'm head of brand of Ignite, and I recently co-founded a company with my husband called Dear Four, and just in time for Filipino American History Month, we launched the very first independent Filipino woman-owned cannabis brand in California. So, amazing this weekend. But before we begin and jump into our panel, which is all about why do Trailblazers get to have all the fun, right? Before we jump into it, I think it'd be great if Mrs. Lewis and Nicole could give a brief introduction. Don't worry, we're going to keep it brief because we're going to go deep in about 2 minutes. So, start?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. I am so thrilled to be here in Chief, and that it's made up of, it's composed of women who are already on the C level, on the executive level. So it's so wonderful that you have your own space, that you started it 5 years ago. So I'm very honored to be here. Thank you.
Yes, likewise, I'd like to echo Mrs. Lewis' sentiments and add that when I was starting my career journey, I really didn't have anyone that looked like me or had any semblance to my culture or upbringing, except for Mrs. Lewis. The CEO, we'll hear her story later, CEO of Beatrice TLC. For me, it was a beacon. And it's very difficult sometimes to see what's possible for yourself unless you have a pathway of someone doing it before you. And that was Mrs. Lewis for me, and I imagine that is what Chief is for many of us. So, thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Okay, so now we're going to ask the fun questions, right? So when we look at the two of you, right, on the outset, you are both Filipino women, right? Professionally, you're both very entrepreneurial Filipino women, right? But I think an interesting thing that I learned in speaking with both of you is that you both have very strong relationships with your parents. And you know, when I think about what it takes to make a trailblazer, right? Trailblazers are forged in fire, right? And they evolve, they shift, they shape over time, right? So I was wondering, and you know, starting with you, Nicole, like how did your upbringing shape the woman that you are today, or the leader, that, you know, the woman and the leader that you are today?
Sure. The question is how I'm on Miss Universe. This is how my family contributed. Well, to cut to the chase on that one, there are really two main reasons that I think I became an entrepreneur and sought this career that I do as a trailblazer, I guess. And that is, my parents did not raise me with gender. And I knew I was a girl, but I had equally G.I. Joe and I had Barbie. And the first question my mother ever asked me was, what is it that you want to do with your life? And I said, roller skate. I don't know, it's such a serious question, but from a very early age, it was impressed upon me that I could do whatever I want, and the bathroom that I was assigned to had nothing to do with my abilities, and I'm very thankful for that. The other main point that my parents raised me with was this, you said unflappable, but I think it was impressed upon me to achieve or to find something within myself to be successful at, a skill set, something that wasn't image. It was, what could I be good at? And to focus on that. And I don't think that that's something that's often carried particularly for thank you, Nicole. And you, Mrs. Lewis.
Yes, well, to begin with, I was born in a province, not Manila, not an urban city, but a province where everybody knew everyone. My father was orphaned when he was 12, and he lived with a rich uncle who was very entrepreneurial. So in his mind, he's also going to be entrepreneurial. But he really wanted to be a lawyer and to enter politics, but he went into business. So when I was growing up, my father was already successful. My mother had, they have two brothers in front of me, and my father was so strict on them. And then I'm the first girl, the third of five. Being the first girl, it's almost like I am the princess. I can do everything. So between my father and my mother, who are very entrepreneurial, I grew up in a family where making deals was like second nature. We would go to, we are close to the sea, so my father would say, how much is that a fish? It's 100 pesos. Oh, that's too much. You know? So now I know, I tell everyone, when somebody gives you a price, ask your price, what? The price will immediately go down. So that's the entrepreneurial in me. Second, my father also believed in value sharing. I really call it brainwashing because his business is in Manila and weekends he would come to Sorsogon and yes, to us. And he would start with, after a sumptuous meal, Saturday night, where we had, great food, and then we would turn to our veranda, where we see the whole town. So we're sort of like, comfortable, middle class, upper middle class. And then he would begin his brainwashing. What are the 5 secrets of success? He doesn't wait for us to answer. He would answer himself. Number 1, hard work. And he would tell us how much he worked, and I knew because Papa worked hard. Mama worked hard too. Number 2, common sense, and he would tell us what common sense is. Like, he always says, you want to go to Quiapo. Quiapo is a church where people go for devotion, and it's flooded. So what do? You swim, or salvavida. Salvavida is a lifeguard. Or you have a bangka. Bangka is a small boat. Or if you can afford it, helicopter. So what it meant for us is that you have to use common sense. Third, perseverance. If at first you don't succeed, try and try again. He says that, but he really gives example from his life. But also, it's important, he said, you go this way, you cannot go there. You go this way again, why are you using the same system when you know you will fail? Sabi ko, tanga. So that's third. Number 4 is, he calls it thrift. Thrift meaning saves in the bank. No, now it's financial literacy. You must know that if you earn $1,008 and you spend $1,200, you'll never make it. You'll always be in debt. So that's his 4th, and 5th is faking that. So see, after so many years, I see that in my brain. So that's how what you see now is maybe forged from that, from my parents from Sorsogon, and believing that whatever I decide to do, I can do. Thank you.
That one, because I've got more for you. Okay, so you told us a little bit about yourselves, right? But, you told us a little bit about who you are, where you came from, but I've got to ask you, who do you think you are, right? And I mean that with absolutely no insolence, right? Because, you, Mrs. Lewis, when we look at your track record, you, in many ways, have lived a life and had achievements that have completely gone against convention, right? When you passed the New York bar, you became the first person to be able to practice in both Asia and in New York, right? Never mind the fact that you were the first Asian person, right, to be able to practice in both states. You were the first Asian woman to own a $1 billion enterprise. You sued the INS and won. Who the heck do you think you are? Where does this come from?
No, I think it's a prostitute habit. Okay, when we were growing up, I'm very competitive. I wanted to be number 1. So I was salutatorian, second only in elementary school. So I worked hard so that I would be valedictorian in high school. And that I would be, in college, I was so bummed. I was working so hard. So I didn't work hard the first year. And I got a 75 in Spanish. And once you get a 70 in St. Teresa's, you are not eligible for summa, nor cum laude, nor summa magna, only cum laude. In college, no may college ako. I tried, but they're also good. I was only number 7 in our class. So that is a habit that you have, that I have. So when I came to the United States, it's not like, oh, I'm this and that and that. You start from the bottom. So from the bottom, I was not admitted. So I wanted to work in private law firm because I told my husband, you work with the big guys, corporate law. I work for the poor guys, poverty law firm. And I started as a secretary because that's all that's available. And so I tracked what I've been doing. And at the end of the year, I talked to the boss. Look, I've done all this. I deserve a raise, not as a secretary, but as a lawyer. So in 3 years, I got the salary of a lawyer. So who am I? You can take me out of the country, but you cannot take me out of. You can take me out of the country, but you cannot take the country out of me. So in the end, I'm just a Filipino.
Oh, I love that. And you, right? So here you are. You're one of the leading voices, if not the leading voice in the Filipino food movement here in the U.S. You redefined what it took to get an ethnic, cookbook published in a way that was not sanitized, right? I keep thinking about all of the dishes that we weren't allowed to kind of show our non-Filipino friends when they would come over to the house. Like, you put it on the page, like blood and all, like literally like blood and all, right? And you, like, walang hiya mo, you're charging people $100 for lumpia, and people are buying it. Like, who the hell do you think you are?
I am a woman who was influenced at a very young age to have hijab. So, actually, by a show of hands, who's here that is Filipino? Okay. So, whether you're Filipino or not, just to have that definition out there, hiya is shame. And I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood, but I knew I was Filipino when I came home. I took my shoes off, I cooked rice for dinner. I knew how to respect my parents. In some ways, I knew I was code switching when I was in school and when I came home. But the intersection of that was an embarrassment, really, of our food and my father. So when my dad would eat with his hands, I would beg him to use the silverware or order a pizza, for Christ's sake, like make it purposeful. Or when I was in grade school and the first time really my teacher acknowledged me
was when we saw Fear Factor, and she finally acknowledged me and said, Nicole, I saw your food on Fear Factor, you eat that? And I shrunk, finally to be recognized, only to be embarrassed for something I ate with my dad as a snack, just the Sunday before. So if we look at my own journey, there is a journey of work, definitely hard work. I think it is part of the Filipino experience. But I think the overriding thing here is I'm a fighter. And my restaurants were an homage to everything I was embarrassed about. So much so that if you ordered balut at Jeepney, we screamed, balut! Or I popularized Kamayan, which that wasn't really a thing. To me, it's interesting to see how Kamayan has really taken over. I can't speak for you, but we did not eat elegantly on banana leaves. It was my father with sinigang and ganin and sapsap, and even didn't go on. So the thread here is, not only am I going to succeed with our culture, I'm going to succeed in everything that was put against us to be embarrassed about. And it has been a challenge, it's been a journey, and it's been rewarding, more than I could ever imagine.
I forgot to mention, that cookbook, I Am a Filipino, This Is How We Cook, I mean, you were a Gene Spirit Award finalist, right? So the fact that you got convention, you were recognized for something that is honestly like, it's an incredible book. All right, so we're gonna move on to the next question. So to you, Mr. Lewis. In your lifetime, you've had so many different roles: mother, lawyer, executive, activist, philanthropist, right? But at some point in time, you must have had some detractors, some haters, right? Can you share a personal life, a moment in your personal life or in your career where you questioned a decision that you made, right? Something, that you're just kind of, God, am I doing the right thing, and during the course of the decision, like what made you decide to stick with it and stay the course?
The question is, when did I ever encounter criticism, right?
Yes, and then our moment, was there ever a moment where, you encountered, because of the haters, the self-doubt, like how did you deal with that? And how did you know that you were on the right course? Did you persevere through all of that and stuff?
I never listened. Why will I devote time to see what do other people think of me? I mean, it's useless. I know who I am, I know what I can achieve, I know what I am not good at. So why will I listen to, social media, they're saying this and that and this and that. If a good friend tells me, Loida, I think you should dance, I have to listen because he's a good friend, he's saying it out of the goodness of his heart. But everybody else, why you listen? They don't care about you. They're maybe even envious. So why give an ear to the negativity? In fact, I'm saying to everyone, if you have friends who can only say negative things about you, stay away, he's poison. Okay? She or he doesn't really care about you. They are maybe envious or their personality is negative. So stay away. Be with positive people. I mean, it's arithmetic. 1 plus 1 equals 2. 1 minus 1 equals 0. So why will it be 0? So your question of, have I ever listened to negativity? No, I don't. But if somebody tells me, a friend, I have to listen and find out whether it's true or not. If it's not true, erase. If it's true, then I have to reflect and see how I can be better. So that's on criticism. Things that happened to me that I think should not was what you said. When I passed the bar in 1974, there was 11 positions open in immigration. And I said, I want that. Why? Because every Filipino who comes has a question of immigration. So better know it from inside, not from private practice. So I applied, sure that all my qualifications, I'll be one of the 11. 1 year later, a letter came to me, you're not chosen. I said, what? I'm good. Why? Because I know that UP College of Law is equivalent to Harvard. The Harvard graduates do not go to government service, limited income, no challenge. So I said, the only way to find out is to sue INS for discrimination. And I did. So it took 1 year on the 3rd year, there was a hearing with an administrative judge. And, although my husband's law firm represented me, I represented myself. And I said, look, all right, there were 11 chosen. I speak 3 languages, English, Filipino, Spanish. I was valedictorian, number 7, law school, law review. You can't be on the law review unless you have something. And I am also in the International Honor Society, Alpha Phi. So, what are the qualifications of this 11? The judge heard me. All right, INS, or immigration. Produce this FS 171. That's the application everybody in government service gives. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. INS did not produce it. So, in law, if you are asked to give evidence and you fail to give evidence or documents, it means it's against you. So the judge says, they did not produce, but she is this and this and this and this. She wins because she was discriminated on national origin, being Filipino, gender because she's a woman, race because she's brown. All right, give her 3 years back pay. That's how I won.
Okay, before we go to the next question, I have to ask, where does your conviction come from? Because, you know, there's a level of like there's an assertiveness there, but it's conviction. Like, how do you know? Like, where does it come from?
I think it's my faith because I'm glad Filipinos are Christian. I am Catholic. I grew up. My mother and father are very not religious, but have a sense of spirituality. And then I studied in the Benedictine Sisters, Saint Agnes in Bicol. Okay, ora et labora. It's like you come into your head. Ora, pray, and labora, work. Pray and work. There were German sisters, so the discipline was very strict. And then I was also with Saint Benedict Belgian nuns, Catholic. And so, by my belief that God loves me, that God cares for me, that God has thought the best for me, and so what do I fear? I mean, it says in the world, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So if I have that faith, how can I doubt? So I think my father's swift brainwashing, faith in God. If you have faith in God, how can you lose? So I think that's the strength I have. And since when Mr. Lewis died, I was really lost. And so we did not experience 25 years of marriage. He died, we were married 24 years and a half. So on that day, 25 years, I said with my best friend, BFF, Angie Cruz, let's go to a retreat. And on that retreat, it was not a retreat, it was a Zen practice. What was that? We were taught to kneel, sit. It's Zen. You sit, face the wall, count your breath. 1, 2, up to 10, and then back again to 1, 2, up to 10 for 20 minutes. And then you walk 5 minutes, counting, and then it's like, what? No talking, okay? Just counting your breath, it's a Zen practice. And with that, it's sort of like I went to a car and went to a car wash. At the end of 5 days, it was like, I was like, almost like touching God and God touching you. So, right now, I think that's my strength, that I take time to just be quiet. Because by being quiet, God can speak to you, or you speak to God. So, if you're asking, where do I get my sturdiness? I think it's my faith in God.
So I think taking a different turn, like also focusing on like resilience and strength, right? We spoke a little bit about your cookbook, and like I cannot understate enough, right? I'm Filipino, this is how we cook, is by far and away one of my most favorite cookbooks. It actually occupies a space on my regular bookshelf, not with my cookbooks. Like, if you haven't read this book, you need to, because it's part cultural history plus the food, and there's something that even the most, like, I'm Filipino, I know everything. You don't, right? You're gonna find something in this book that you did not know, right? But getting the book published, it wasn't an easy, thing to do. So, Nicole, if you could, I would love for you to share a little bit about what that journey was like, because you had to do things that, had never been done before in many ways.
Sure.
Just to give a little bit of context, in 1998, when I was working
In advertising, I began to understand representation in media, and I really didn't see Asians, much less Filipinos. And when we were tasked with casting an ad or a commercial, if you were Black, you were an Ebony, an Essence, or Jet. And if you were white, you were everywhere. And then I began to understand the context of power and representation and dollars and commerce and why they were targeting the specific reader or casting the way they did. But I said, hey, wait a minute. Filipinos are the second largest Asian group in America. We fought for the US military, we speak English, we are educated. Why are we not as important? Why is the brown dollar not as important as the others? And so that was the impetus for me to do a restaurant. I thought maybe if I can get people interested in the food, I could get people interested in the culture. That's the short. This is before Food Network and before internet. So I had plotted a vision. I was going to create the first commercially and critically successful Filipino restaurant that would be rooted in authenticity, culturally relevant, studious. I wanted it to have some substance. And I went on a journey where I was an ad exec by day, and at night I was a dishwasher and host to learn this restaurant industry. Amongst the goals was I was going to do a successful cookbook. So that's how we are here. There was one major Filipino cookbook at the time, written by Amy Dorotan, and it was Memoirs of a Philippine Kitchen. Fantastic, elegant, and also crossover. But we weren't at that critical tipping point that we're at now with social media and food. So my book was substantive, but I think we also hit an important impasse where it could be received well and commercially successful. So now we get to the point where I'm publishing. And it was fairly easy for me to get an agent and then to sell it to a publisher. In fact, it was a bidding war of two major publishers, W.W. Norton and Artisan. And I am the first Filipino cookbook to get a six-figure deal. That doesn't mean it goes to my pocket, but it means it goes to my photography, and I spent every last dollar toward the execution of this. And to get paid back royalty, you have to pay back the advance. Okay, so here's where it gets juicy. I was able to hire a ghostwriter. I had never written a book before, so I understand a publisher who's going to invest a six-figure deal may want a sure thing. So I interviewed some ghostwriters, and I landed on one. Within 2 weeks, it was very clear to me that our viewpoints were going to be very different. And the example is, I had written in a chapter that our ancestors must have been genius to understand the technology of vinegar to not only preserve the food in Thai food, but be really delicious. And my ghostwriter said, I don't think readers are going to be interested in that. And it was crushing to me. It wasn't interesting for her. But I understood we are a sleeping giant, and although you may not recognize Filipinos as an important buyer, oh, we're powerful. And so I fought and I fired her. Great! That was hurdle number one. Hurdle number two was overcoming the fear of being first in the door and rattling the cage too much that I might get the deal getting delayed for me. So when the publisher also started pushing back on some of the narrative, I was very nervous. And so I hired two Pulitzer Prize winning journalists and authors, not hired them, but enlisted them, to look at the final manuscript where my publisher had redlined so many facts and enrichment content. And I had them read it, Juno Diaz and Jose Antonio Vargas. And I called a meeting with my publisher, and I presented both of those authors and journalists' argument about why this book should be as is. And my publisher said, are you calling us racist? Because I was challenging a lot of what they were redlining. And I said, sometimes you can be racist and not know it. The last anecdote to that is I started the meeting, and I was nervous. No one tells you how to have a serious or contentious meeting. I pressed play on YouTube for an interview with Dave Chappelle and Howard Stern. And they were all talking about Filipinos. Filipinos is sweet, Dave, and you want this or you want that. And I pressed stop, and they said, okay, so what was the point of that clip? I said, they're all talking about Filipinos, and no one in the room is Filipino. Let me talk about us the way a Filipino would talk about us. So that, Jose and Juno, and the redlining, I was able to get the book published the way it should.
So you talked about being first to get into the door, right? And so I guess my question, I'm going to turn over to Mrs. Lewis, like, you had a very conscious choice to be first, because you decided to pursue the restaurant, pursue the cookbook, and again, it was very much a conscious choice that you were making to press forward. But I think, when you think about your achievements, right, being first wasn't necessarily a choice for you, right? It is by happenstance that you happen to be the first Asian, to be able to practice law, practice law both here, and in Asia, right? You didn't necessarily choose to be the first Asian woman to own $1 billion org, yet here you are, right? What does being first mean to you?
Well, I didn't want to be first, but circumstances in 1973 was that the Supreme Court of the United States said, being American has nothing to do with being a good lawyer. So they knocked out American citizenship as a requirement for taking the bar. Number two, United States we were a colony of the United States. And in 1908, the United States established the government, established University of the Philippines. And the College of Law is copied completely after an American law school. We have the same, more or less, same subject matter for constitutional law, administrative law, labor law, insurance law, and all the others except civil law and criminal law, which is Pepe Partidas. They kept the Spanish law. So as soon as that happened, I took the bar. Because I'm UP College of Law, and 1974 I passed. So who else is not an American who could take the bar without studying in the United States but me? So I said, I'm the first Filipina, I'm the first woman. Not that I was doing that, but that's the circumstances. Second, Mr. Lewis bought a $1 billion company in 1987. Beatrice International Foods. He worked with me for 5 years, we lived in Paris, and then he died suddenly. It took me a year, and I'm so glad we're Filipino. We have 1 year of luksa, meaning mourning, because it took me that long. And then, when we were interviewing, Mr. Lewis asked his brother, my brother-in-law, to be CEO, but obviously he was not trained to be a CEO. So we started to interview 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 potential CEOs, asking a lot of money, which is okay. Most of them are white, which is okay. But none of them will say, "Don't worry, Mrs. Lewis, I can make it successful." So I said, I'll try my best. That's all they will say. What if it fails? So I'll be pointing finger, you, and then 3 fingers are pointing at me. So better me than them. And I knew that I can become CEO because Mr. Lewis owned 51%. So if any of my board of directors do not elect me, I can fire them. So it's not like, I aim to be the first woman to run a $1 billion business. It happened. And I said, take responsibility for my family and myself. Mr. Lewis wanted to be the richest black man in America. He didn't finish it. I will finish it. And I did.
I think coming to you, and you're first with the cookbook and the restaurant, the impact that you've had on Filipino food in this country has just been astounding. Did you realize that, from Maharlika to Jeepney to the book to Jeepney Miami, did you realize how much of an impact that you're going to have on just Filipino food and culture and representation of Filipinos, through our food? How do you feel, knowing that this is what you've been able to do so far? Because you know that you are.
I did know. And I don't want to say I didn't with false modesty. I do know the impact because I knew there was a need and I knew there was a void. When I was building my business plan, I had a grid. And on the X and Y axis, I had authentic Filipino food and fusion. High-end and karinderya, turo-turo, more humble. In this space here, in this quadrant, there was nothing. Nothing elevated, nothing that if you had a corporate card, nothing that if you wanted to listen to Biggie and have a little lumpia, there was nothing that could speak to me and my colleagues And I was desperate for that. And in my business plan, I wrote that if we were successful, not only would we succeed, it would open the doors. And I knew also strategically that the press and the conversations would always wind up coming back to us. And knowing that that was my goal, not out of ego and not out of wanting to be number one, although it's really great to be number one, it was, I wanted to show that Filipinos could have a level of excellence. And I wanted to do it in hospitality, and I hadn't seen it yet. And if we did it right, and we set a bar, not only would others want to meet that, they would surpass. And so now we have Kasama in Chicago with a Michelin, Tom Cunanan in Basking at the time. It is exactly what I knew, that if we did it, we could show others what was possible. And that's important not only for the entrepreneur or the creator, but for stakeholders, investors. Because if there's no proof of concept, it's even that much more difficult. So taking it on the chin, it was difficult. 9 out of 10 restaurants fail, 90% fail in year one. Very few, if any, are owned or run by women. And there was no proof of concept of Filipino cuisine. So there were a lot of barriers. Also, the average restaurant costs $300,000 to $500,000. I opened my first restaurant with $10K and my restaurant with $80,000. So this was really built on spirit and intention. And I think it was contagious that the team behind me adopted that. And that's really how we were able to succeed. And it was authentic, and our guests felt it. One last anecdote. We opened on January 2nd as a pop-up. At the time, the word pop-up did not exist, only limited time engagement. New York Time Out said there's a restaurant popping up. So we were also helpful in starting what we now know as a pop-up. I didn't know that at the time. January 2nd, no guests. I paid my server $100 to show up the next day. Next Saturday, nothing, 3 guests, my roommates. By the third weekend, it was dead of January, snow falling, my face pressed against the window, and I said, guys, get over here. And they're like, what? There was a line, a 2-block line.
My stomach and my heart are very happy that you pressed forward. But I think what you just said about spirit and conviction, right? Did I get that right? Yeah, I think it's a common theme that I'm hearing from both of your, stories, and I think it's something important to take to heart. Let's turn to your book, Mrs. Lewis. Right? It's not your first book, right? Your first book was a book on immigration law that's had 14 printings. Yeah. So. Amazing. But your most recent book, right? Why do guys get to have all the fun? It's not your first book, but it's truly the first time you're telling your story, right, in print. So, why was it important for you to share this? You documented your story for the first time. Why was this important for you?
Yes, when Mr. Lewis bought the Beatrice companies, it was based in Western Europe, so we moved to Paris. I said goodbye to my immigration job. I was there for 10 years. And so in Paris, I applied for a job at the American Embassy. I said, $1 salary, but they wanted me to be assigned anywhere they want. I said, forget it. So what will I do with time? My time, I said, I'll write the book, How to Get a Green Card. And I was writing it, and Mr. Lewis would be going to the office, I'd stand up, say goodbye to him at the door, and then come back and type. And one time, I was typing so furiously that he was passing by and just stopped. You're writing your book, I'm jealous. He said, darling, you have a book to write, your life story. So he started writing by hand, 5 years later, he died. But his book was not finished. So I said, he has to finish the book. And he had a title for it. His title is, Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? So I found Blair Walker to co-write it. And this is my advice to everyone. All of you have a story to tell. You must just find a good co-writer. So I found Blair Walker. He interviewed 150 of Mr. Lewis, relatives, friends, classmates, colleagues, and all that, and he finished it. Why should white guys have all the fun? How Reginald Lewis created a billion-dollar business empire, and it was published by Wiley and Sons. They gave him we got an advance, and then when it was finished, it became bestseller in Business Week, and it sold around 50,000 copies. So for the past 25 years, I've been going around talking about this because people, when they, I meet people, especially African American men, and they'll say, Mrs. Lewis, I read this book and I changed my career. Or I read this book and I aimed for the top. I read this book and now I'm an entrepreneur. So all of them are saying that. And I'm happy because that was the goal. 25 years, in that book, I'm just chapter 6. I have more than one chapter. And besides, when I was 60, Catherine Graham published her biography. She is the CEO of Washington Post. Just like me, her husband died suddenly. And she made it very successful. So I said, 75, when I'm 75, I'm going to publish also my own personal biography. But I turned 75, 76, 77, 78, 79. I'm turning 80. So I told Blair Walker, Blair, you have to help me finish the book. You know half of my story, you do the other half. And then instead of going to several publishers, I told Wiley and Sons, they know my husband's book. So they said, yes, I buy it. And they gave me, after 30 years, the same advance that they gave Mr. Lewis. No increase. It's okay. It's okay. And that's what I tell everybody. Don't self-publish. Find a publisher. Because they gave me an advance. And if I don't finish the book, I have to give up the money. And what self-respecting businesswoman will give up the money because I failed to do it? That's why I finished the book. And then they said, I want the name, Why Should Guys Have All the Fun, to take off of my husband. And my publisher, and even my own co-writer, Loida, it should be like something like Mrs. Lewis to CEO. I said, forget that, nobody will read that book. It's better, this one, Why Should Guys Have All the Fun, because not only is it take off, it's also challenging. And so that's how it happened. I got an advance, I finished the book, Wiley and Sons published it, and I said, one chapter versus 18 chapters. That's my story.
So, Trailblazers flames don't burn out, right? They don't extinguish. There's always something that is next. So, Nicole, what's next, right? Because you just did Gold Belly, you've got the book, what's next?
Well, before I answer that question of what's next, I would like to identify something from Mrs. Lewis. And it's very thoughtful and very sweet. And over the years, she would take articles and send them to me about other restaurateurs or just very sweet. She didn't have to do that. That's what she does. And I could tell either she was in a plane and maybe she read in an airplane magazine, oh, let me remove this and send it to and you could tell and send it to Nicole. And it would have not even a letter, fine, didn't have to, but a post-it. Nicole, look at this example. They're doing it in Chicago. Check it out. Exclamation, Loida. And at times I would reach out to her. This is wonderful to me to be able not only to share the stage with Lisa and Mrs. Lewis, but we're Filipino, and also in our culture we are known sometimes for crab mentality, which is the idea of crabs trying to get out of the bin, and if you get high, let me pull you down. And maybe it's not even action oriented to take you down, it's I gotta survive. And it's so remarkable that this isn't necessarily token. We happen to be three Pinais on stage and intergenerational and different experiences, different backgrounds, and I'm just still shocked that I'm here, and I love Mrs. Liz very much. So I just want to say that. What was your question?
So I closed the restaurants due to COVID. People had asked to invest, even so far as 2015 and 16, let me invest in you, I want to invest, what do you want to do? I did not think that the restaurants were scalable, and I didn't want the responsibility of taking people's money and not being responsible with it. After COVID, what I saw was I wanted to do a business that was scalable, and I'm trying again to find the void. And what I'd like to do now is to disrupt the frozen food aisle. If we look at, again, that kind of matrix, there is maybe one or two, lots in the Caranderia and Turuturu, but nothing at Walmart, nothing at Publix. And I think if we can enjoy Thai food, Indian samosas, ramen, we can certainly enjoy barbecue, pancit, lahing. So I'm working on a frozen food line. I've done a soft launch on Goldbelly, and so I have a prototype, and I'm in pre-seed. And Brian Reed, which is Elisa's husband, has been so helpful in helping me navigate, how do I look at my finances? How do I raise? How do I evaluate? What is a safe agreement? And so again, I'm not looking outside of our community, I get to look within to help build. And so that's what's next. And I'd like to do another book, and I want to rival Gwyneth Paltrow. We need another option.
Yes.
And something that maybe looks like us too. So that those would be my rares.
Mrs. Lewis, like, what's next? There's so much. On the writing scale, everyone, when they say, you're 80, you look so young. So in my mind, maybe my next book should be How to Look Younger When You're Older Without Botox. On the political front, I am aghast and just totally disgusted that in the public market, you can buy a company that invests on prisons. And ever since that became a public company, the number of people in prison tripled or even quadrupled. But what does that mean? It means the more prisoners you have in prison, the less service you give. Government will give you money for you doing the prison system, and that's how you get profitable. I said, what kind of country is the United States that will make money on people's lives? And it seems that when I went to a high school and I asked the principal, what are your challenges? And they said, many of my class our students in freshmen do not know how to read. So what happened to the educational system? And it seems that at one point, they changed the manner of teaching how to read. Instead of phonetics like F or S, Sam, E, elephant, it becomes like the Chinese. You recognize the word. You have to recognize all the words rather than phonetics. To purposely, I think, not teach young people, especially blacks, how to read. Because by third grade, if you do not know how to read, you're on the pipeline to prison. So my advocacy will be to go to Congress and work to eliminate and to make illegal public companies of prison.
Wow.
I feel very, let me see, what's the word for it? I need to find a few more aspirations. What's next? Breakfast tomorrow? I'm kidding. All kidding aside. So much to think about. Like this, I'm blown away by that. So before we open it up to questions, I'm just going to stick to the script now, because if not, I'm going to get overwhelmed. Before we get to questions, I do have an ask. Right. At this point in time, Asian women hold only 1.8% of C-suite roles, and they receive less than 1% of VC funding. Right. As Trailblazers, what can we do to reverse that trend? Because both of you have achieved incredible success. And there are a lot of women that, from our community and just women across the board, who would love to achieve that level of success. So what advice, what thoughts do you have? What could we do to start to reverse that trend?
And the question is to encourage more of
To
us.
get more women
into
into
executive-
C-suite, yeah, more C-suite roles or get more VC funding.
Well, if you have the answer to the latter, please do share with me. I'm on that journey now, so as I grow and find out, I'll share what resources I find. But so far, Brian and Lisa, a handful of people have been very instrumental in getting my journey started there. The other question is how do we encourage more people of our background to get into the C-suite and executive? Well, I'd be curious.
Yeah.
I'm more curious why not. If I can address why not, then I can address how we can encourage it.
Yeah.
Unless I know that, I could make some guesses, but it might be ineffective use of time. But what I could surmise is that our culture is hospitable, and we have nestled in middle management, and it does require a certain personality. It requires a certain wherewithal and an interest to do that. And I don't know if it's a lack of interest or a lack of opportunity. I'm not well versed in that to be able to define that. But I think rooms like this certainly help encourage it.
All right, I think we have to go back in history because until the 1970s, women's concept of their role is motherhood, teacher. Very few, I think, I'm talking about United States, because in the Philippines, we're one of the highest number. We're one of the top 5 countries where women are in the executive suite. So I'm not talking about the Philippines, I'm talking about the United States. And as I said, until 1970, the thought for women are just home, wife, teacher, not very ambitious. But starting 1970, Harvard Law School, which did not admit women, Yale Law School, started to accept women in law school. And that started the trend all over the law schools. They accepted women now. So, Harvard Club, when Mr. Lewis was courting me or bringing me to Harvard Club, we had to pass a special door to go to the club. And we did not go to the main dining room. We went to a second floor where all the women and their sweetheart or their husbands or their sons or brothers can go. So that's 1972 that they changed that rule. So 1972 to 2000, that's around 50 years. So it's only that time that women can, more women, American women, are going to law school. In fact, now at Harvard Law School, almost 45% are women, almost 50%. So it's not like, it's the history. And so for the women now, especially the young women listening today, it's up to you whether you want to go to the very top. And you will say, how did you manage it, Loida, Tita Loida, that you had a husband, children, full-time job, and I was trying to be a real estate mogul. What happened? And it's in chapter 10. I was doing so many things. So, what did I get? TB, tuberculosis. I had to stay away from work for 3 months. So for all of you, you have to say, yes, you can do it all, but not all at the same time. Otherwise, your health will suffer, or your marriage will be broken, or your children will be maladjusted, or you will lose your job. You cannot have everything. The men, no, different. We are different from men. Okay? Don't say, why can they do it and I can't? Look, he's a man and you're a woman. So you're different. So be a woman. Or if you're trans, be a trans. Be your own true self. And set your goal. If your goal is not to have children, that's your goal. If your goal is to have children and a husband, then maybe you don't want to be also in the street because, that's too many balls up in the air. You'll go crazy. So you can have it all, but not all at the same time.
So let's open it up to questions, because I'm sure you guys have, or you ladies and gentlemen, have many, many questions for Mrs. Lewis and Nicole. Who wants to fire away? Question on that. Okay.
Nora, by the way, is my niece. She's a Broadway star. She was here in Miss Saigon.
Not on Broadway.
Regional.
Regional. Two productions. Thank you, Tita.
So I will give you the mic.
Anyone? Questions?
I don't need a mic. Nicole, what was the dish you prepared on Fear Factor?
No, it was that they had balut on Fear Factor, and my teacher was like, gross. And then I shrunk. That was,
I don't need a microphone. Okay, so in terms of your writing the book and the whole pitch process around that, did you find it was like hard to find a publisher for your story as Asian American women, for people to like be interested in it? Because I have friends who have self-published and they like it because it's their own ownership, it's their own brand. Whereas for those who have published with a large publishing house, it was a very different experience. So I was curious to know, because you mentioned that it's better to publish with them because you can get a whole advance and what that means. So I was just curious about that.
Yes. Self-publish is great, but you can distribute it or who buys it. Yes, there's Amazon.com, but you don't have the distribution arm of a publisher. Bookstores. You don't, you have to call every bookstore to carry your book. Airlines, and in other words, the publisher that you selected has this network already. So self-published also is, you're writing it, no co-author, no edit, your own editing. I was writing, and I have a co-writer who has written on the 5th, so he's very well versed in writing autobiography. When I won a case in the Supreme Court in the Philippines, because we became we reacquired our Filipino citizenship in 2004, and there was an election. So all of us, friends and others, registered to vote in the election because we became American citizens again. And the COMELEC, Commission on Elections, said, no, you were once a foreigner, even though you acquired Filipino citizenship, you cannot vote. I said, what? Citizenship is crucial to suffrage. Voting is part and parcel of being a citizen. And so I filed a case in the Supreme Court. And, because they were wrong, I won it 15-1. So I wrote this chapter, everything, the names of my lawyers, the names of the 15 judges who ruled for me, and my editors, my co-writer. And Leroy said, Loida, nobody's interested. Cross the chapter. And he finished it in 3 sentences. So if I were doing self-publish, I read all of that. So that's why I recommend get a co-writer, and then you say, how do I find one? Go to Barnes & Noble, look at all of their memoirs. All of them either have a co-writer or thank you to my editor who do this and that and that and that. I would not have done without you. That's the co-writer. All right. So you are it's very simple. You are a teacher. All right. You have a specialty. You don't teach math. You're an English major, right? So you want to write a book. You're not a book writer, and so you find somebody who will help you. So that's my advice.
Other questions?
I also don't need a mic. Mrs. Lewis, you mentioned that you can have it all, but just don't try and necessarily do it all at once. Do you have any examples of taking a break or having what I call like a fallow period while you did prioritize one thing, such as bringing up your children? Did you take a break? You know, aside from that 3 months that you had to take it off with TV, are there other examples of when you did take?
No, my example is that what I chose, a government job, 9 to 5. Okay. For myself, my goal was as a government writer to do the best job. And in immigration, on the lawyers, attorney general level, we were 15 at the time. But anytime somebody comes to ask a question from the receptionist, they give it to me. Why? Because for me, that's a job. I'm a government servant. I serve. So you have to create your own circle of expertise. Don't say, oh, I'm only being paid this and I give that. No, you make a reputation of what you do in your job. So your question is, how do I select? I selected a job that was not, if I went to a Paul Weiss, a law firm, it's dog eat dog. It means you have to work 15 hours a day just to go for partnership. So, I made a choice. I will be 9 to 5. I will have 2 girls. So it's a choice. And you choose according to your own heart. If you really want to be partner, then you have to, you have to have an agreement with your husband that you're going to go for that job. Maybe you'll postpone having children, or maybe you'll have children, he stays home. It's all, and again, if you're going to have a partner, you are a team. But in that team, there's only one captain or one CEO. I don't see any successful 2 CEOs in the company. But I have seen couples where sometimes she's the CEO and sometimes he. So it's all an agreement. If you have somebody special, you agree on spirituality, on children, on career, and on the 2 of you, how do you settle disagreement? I settle disagreement by being quiet. I do not speak. Why? Because I've seen my father and mother talk like, cats and dogs. My mother will say something, and my father will answer so far. And then speaking in Tagalog, and Papa will say something, and the answer of my mother was so far. So in my mind, if ever I get married, because I wasn't planning to get married, I will never talk. So we're angry, I'm angry. And that's what he said. I know what that silence is, Loida. That's aggressive silence. But eventually I understood. He was black. And he may have won, he may have this billion-dollar company, he may be driving a Rolls Royce, he may be dressed well, but when he comes out in American society, he's still black. So he's subject to racism, discrimination, outright patronizing, and even insult. So when he comes home, I say something, S-H-I-T, MF, F-U-C-K. So initially it was like, what is this? But then when he said, Loida, you don't know where I live, then I understood what that means. He's black in an American society. So I should be totally understanding that when he blows up, it's okay, you're home. In fact, I tell this to the audience. He's fighting dragons and monsters out there. When he comes home, there should be no dragon. It should be, you ate again. No. Darling, have you eaten? No, you have to, he's my husband. I love him. So cherish him. Do you want a reflexology? Do you want a massage? Because that's what he needs. He's out there fighting for me, for the family. So I should give him the care and the love and the cherish and all the things that me as a woman am capable of.
We'll take one more question. Sandy.
So, Nicole, I was very sad when Jeepney closed, and totally missed the cuisine, so thank you for starting that. Mexican food started, as you were saying, I love the chart you were speaking of, and then suddenly Cosme came about. What would be the path to create a Cosme type for Filipino food?
I think we have that now with Kasama in Chicago, getting a Michelin rating is on par with an Oscar, and there's not much higher than that. James Beard maybe, which I think they won both, so kudos to them. I think that question going one further is, since 2012, Andrew Zimmerman coined that Filipino food is going to be the next big thing. And we continue to see us making inroads in restaurants, in the press, ube at Trader Joe's. But we're still not at a tipping point where you can go to any city, much like any city in America, where you can have Thai food, Mexican food, you name it. We're still not there with Filipino food. And I think to get there requires an enforcement of entrepreneurship. And I don't think that Filipinos, to my knowledge, are encouraged to be entrepreneurial. We are encouraged to take very safe jobs, prestigious jobs, that have a salary, that have 401k, health insurance, and that are our parents can brag about. And also feel safe knowing that their children are safe. Entrepreneurship is very risky. It's a very risky job. You have to not only embrace it, but know that it's part and parcel with the gig. And that's not necessarily true for our culture to embrace that. I don't know if you agree with that, but I certainly see it. I see the head nodding, so yes. And rightly so. Food has gotten a lot of glamour from Food Network and so many shows. But at the core of it, it's a blue-collar job. And I have the burn marks, and I have the back breaking to tell you firsthand. And so I'm curious what other pathways Filipino food can make in addition to restaurants. Maybe CPG, frozen food might help make that so it becomes normalized. So just as an aside, I think that I have a theory of how things get into a tipping point. It usually starts academically with people who are thinkers, who know history, that can see the thread line of what has been successful and what hasn't. Activists, people who have that fervor within them to vocalize it. And then comes commercialism. And when it becomes commercial, through these different stages, then it becomes normalized. So we have academics, we have activists, and now we're embracing the commercial side.
All right, no, thank you so much. Before we go, I wanted to bring Laura back up here. So you know already that she's a big Broadway star. She's
Say
yes.
I will say if it means you could donate to our Democrat.
But wanted to share an update on Here Lies Love. She's also a producer.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for giving me the floor. I was told I had 2 minutes to speak, so I'll make this quick. Hi, I am a co-producer with Here Lies Love on Broadway. If you haven't, thank you. Okay, yes. I don't know if people have already seen it, but if you haven't and you don't know what it is the first Filipino story on Broadway with music by David Byrne and Fatboy Slim. It is about the rise and fall of Imelda Marcos and the People Power Revolution. If you haven't experienced the show yet, please come and see the show, bring a big group. However, actually something that you said actually really resonated with me. The proof of concept part. Here Lies Love shows the world that it can be done, what is possible. Filipinos now have a show on Broadway, and it's one of a kind. Like, there is nothing like it on Broadway right now. It's thoroughly immersive. It is in a club setting, like in a disco. It's just, I can't name of a show that has done that. So it's a revolutionary musical. But it's a whole other hill to climb to be able to stay there. Unfortunately, post-pandemic Broadway is just a whole different terrain. And despite the rave reviews and amazing word of mouth from everyone who's seen it, our show is no different from other shows that have a not as recognizable IP. So according to a survey made by Telecharge, 80% of theater goers do not purchase a ticket to Here Lies Love because they don't know what it is. Our show is very specific, and we were hoping that with it being immersive, people will just go out and buy a ticket. But most tourists nowadays, they would come they already have either tickets to Lion King, or even if it's a new show, it could be Back to the Future, something like that. That's what they would rather put their dollars into. So we have a solution, and that's the Democracy in Action Ticketing Initiative. For now, we are trying to raise over $1 million to help get student groups and community organizations to come see the show for free. So I have a QR code here that I could share to everyone later, as well as some pamphlets of the show. You could donate any amount. Please share. Let everyone you know about this ticketing initiative, because not only is it a fun, and it's like a really great entertaining time at the theater, but it also has a very important message about democracy. I was in a lunch with Maria Ressa the other day, and she said 72% of the world's governments right now are like leaning towards authoritarianism, which about a year ago was only at 60%. Now we're at 72%. It's a very important show for this timeline, for this time in the universe. So we would love to save it. We would like to keep on going. And if at the moment, you can't donate or don't know people who could donate, please talk to me, because maybe you could bring a huge group. Get as many people as you know to know about our show, because that is one of the problems is the awareness, the lack of awareness. So in that regard, maybe you could also help. So thank you.
Thank you. So thank you so much for, if you haven't seen it, definitely go see it, for sure, it's amazing. So thank you all for coming this evening. I hope you enjoyed the food that was lovingly prepared by Kevin. I hope you got to try the cocktails that were inspired by Dear Forest flavors that were created by Julian, Dustin, and Crystal. Wanted to say a big thank you to Marianne, Amanda, and the whole Clubhouse crew. By the way, Kevin, if you're there next time, we're going to do Lechon. If you can't do that. Can we do Lechon next time?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. We're doing it next year, Lechon. Done. And of course, thank you so much to Mrs. Lewis and Nicole. We have several copies of their books here. Both Mrs. Lewis and Nicole are going to be signing books over this way, so please stick around, have another cocktail, eat some more food, because this wouldn't be a Filipino party if somebody weren't trying to cram more food. And enjoy. Thank you.